Welcome to the Parnassa Podcast, where we deep dive into the financial challenges and opportunities Frum families face today. I'm your host, Eli Fried. Join me as we tackle the Parnassa questions on everyone's minds. How can we, as Frum Yidden living in the United States, make ends meet, build wealth, and live a Torah life with simcha and menuchas nefesh? Whether you're struggling to cover yeshiva tuition, wondering why your hefty income isn't stretching far enough, or looking for practical, savvy ways to help you and others with Parnassa, you've come to the right place. Together, we'll explore money and wealth through the lens of Torah, offering proactive, positive, and practical advice to navigate the unique financial landscape of Frum life. So let's roll. Okay, hi. Welcome to the second episode of the Parnassa Podcast. In this episode, we'd like to answer two very important Parnassa questions. First of all, what are so many Frum families doing wrong when it comes to their Parnassa? And second of all, why is Frum life so expensive? So regarding the first question, I get this question pretty regularly. People come over to me, they text me, friends, family, acquaintances. Eli, what am I doing wrong? Very often, these are couples that are married 10, 15 years. They have two good jobs. They're bringing in, say, $250,000, and they're still just barely making ends meet. At this point, they're doing really well in their careers, but they are starting to recognize they have 4 kids, 5 kids, 6 kids. They're paying a whole bunch of tuitions, and their expenses are so high. The money, as fast as the money comes in, the money goes out. And they start getting apprehensive, and they say, look, we know we're earning a ton of money. We know $250,000 in America is considered a very good salary. So why do we feel like we could barely make it to the end of the month? And we definitely don't have money to save for our futures, for children's simchas, for retirement, generally building wealth. They get really frightened. Obviously, we're doing something wrong. If we could be earning in the top 10% of American households and we're still not making it, what are we doing wrong? Now, it's important to note when we are speaking here throughout the episode about a Frum couple earning $250,000 and still feeling that they can't make ends meet, that does not mean to say that $250,000 is the normal average salary in the Frum world. Actually, a number of surveys seem to indicate that the median Frum family household income is somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000. So $250,000 would put them towards the higher end, even among Frum families. I'm using that to illustrate the point even more strongly, that even a couple who's earning $250,000 will very often have a sense that they must be doing something wrong because they know they're earning a lot of money. And even so, by basic Frum expenditures, they still feel like they cannot make ends meet. So I get this question very often. And really, the second question is the answer to the first question. The second question was, why is Frum life so expensive? And really, that is just basic math. If someone has very, very high expenses, but they're a large Frum family, it's really nothing they're doing wrong. They're actually doing everything right. They're living a Frum lifestyle. They're following things in a logical manner. But simple mathematics will be able to show that a Frum family, even if they're earning far more than the average of the American family, but their expenses are even all the more greater than average. Frum family can easily have expenses that are 3, 4, 5 times what the average American family has. And because of that, it's obvious that if you're earning double what the average American family earns or triple what the American family earns, but your expenses are far greater than that, you're still not going to have enough money. The average American household had a pre-tax income in 2022 of $94,000, according to the Census Bureau, but their expenditures were only $73,000. So they were doing just fine. Earning 94, yes, it was pre-tax, but as we'll discuss, the tax burden of a family earning $94,000 is not high at all, and their expenditures were $73,000. So the Frum family, the one that comes to me and says, Eli, what are we doing wrong? We're earning $250,000 gross pre-tax, But yes, your expenses are probably far more than $73,000. In fact, as we're going to demonstrate, it's very, very likely that your costs are 3, 4 times greater than the 73,000. So when you start doing the math, it makes perfect sense that Frum families really, really have to be very careful and economical in how they pay their bills, because despite the high salaries, they really are not earning enough to be socking away tons of money. Now, before I go into some detail and numbers, I want to stress this is not a complaint, and this does not mean we're doing something wrong. Hashem gives us our parnasa. We're just doing our shtadlis. And frankly, it's obvious that someone who is doing what he's supposed to do to live a frum life, he's having a large family, he's sending them to yeshiva, he and she are running a kosher home. They're doing everything that they believe is appropriate to raise a frum family, a Torah family. Then everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy or a bed of roses at all times. Parnas is going to be difficult. That's actually normal. But what we're highlighting here is the reverse, is that people shouldn't be panicked that they're doing something wrong just because they're earning in the top 10% of American incomes and they still can barely make ends meet. It actually makes perfect mathematical sense that Yossi Schmidt's expenses far, far, far exceed Joe Smith's expenses. So we're going to be using the Census Bureau's Consumer Expenditure Survey, which highlights 8 key segments of expenses. We're going to go through most of those, and we're actually going to add one of our own. But before I go into the nitty-gritty, let's think big picture. What are a number of factors that would make a Frum family's expenses far exceed the average American family's expenses? So the one that jumps out the first is the cost of being Frum, the Yiddishkeit costs. Again, not a complaint, not at all, but it does cost money to buy kosher food. Kosher food is far more expensive than non-kosher food. The real big item is yeshiva tuition. The vast majority of American students, American children, are schooled in public school, which does not have a direct cost to the family. Most American kids, most American families are not paying for their tuition. It's subsidized by the government, i.e. the taxpayers. So the people sending to private school, for the most part, are very, very wealthy families in America. In the Frum world, sending to private school, i.e. yeshiva, is the norm, thankfully. And that is why, Baruch Hashem, the overwhelming majority of Frum kids come out the other side as wonderful Frum adults, but it is very expensive. Shabbos and Yantiv, yes, it's not in the cheshbon of Mizaynis of Kitzuvim Mirashon and Rosh Hashanah, but still, it costs money. Simchas, Brisim, Bar Mitzvahs, Shever Brachis are Jewish costs that the average American family are not spending on. However, there are a number of other factors that often are missed when people are trying to contemplate the mathematics of Frum family expenses. So another one that should be obvious is simply family sizes. The most common number of children for families in America that have children is 2. That is the most common number. It's very, very unusual for families to have more than 4 children in America, whereas in the Frum world, 4 to 8 kids is the norm, and even 10 to 12 children isn't a shocker. So it's, again, a matter of simple mathematics. If you have the average American household is between 3 and 4 people, but the average Frum household is 6, 8, 10, 12 people, then obviously the expense of food is going to be much higher. The clothing expense is going to be much higher. You'll probably need a bigger house on average, and so on and so forth. So that's the second of 5 factors that make Frum life so expensive. The next one I would point to is a very unique circumstance of our social circle. We all understand that spending is very much influenced by those around you. Certain norms that it's just human nature. That the Rambam acknowledges that even among Frum Jews who work on their Musar and Midas and everything, it's perfect human nature that we are influenced by our society and our social circle. And therefore, the Frum world has a very unique quirk in that because of the very tight-knit nature of Frum life, it is not unusual at all to have a great intermingling of income classes in one tight circle. Generally, in the non-Frum world, the richer you are, the further out you live. You live in a more exclusive area, you get yourself off, the gate gets higher and wider the more money you have. It is very, very rare that someone earning $1 million a year will live with someone who's earning 100,000. Someone earning 100,000 will live with someone who's earning 25,000. And definitely the super duper wealthy are definitely segregating themselves off. In the Frum world, it is not unusual at all to have billionaires and paupers davening next to each other in shul. Not only that, they may be mishadach with each other. They very often will be charusis. They'll sit in a chair together. They may even be siblings. And because of that, there are many, many wonderful benefits. It's far easier to get jobs than average. It's far easier to raise money for important projects, for businesses. Tzedakah projects and necessities get funded with great ease relative to the American public's social needs. When you have the very wealthy that are living tightly and care very much about all aspects of their Frum society. However, the norms of spending are also greatly influenced by the people who have money, and it's not necessarily anything wrong when the vendors are providing luxury services, high-end services, high-end foods, high-end clothing to people who can easily afford it, whether convenience sakes or just a matter of personal taste. But that raises the bar, it raises norms, and that trickles down. And therefore, that is a cost factor that is relevant to the Frum world. Geography. The vast majority of Frum Jews are located in very expensive parts of the country. New York, New Jersey, California are where the vast majority of Frum Jews are located. And that geographical component obviously affects housing. It's much more expensive in Frum areas. And the prior point that we're competing for housing, not just with people in the same income level as each other, but often there's somebody far wealthier that's able to pay any price for a house in the block in the neighborhood. But even beyond that, you have property taxes, income taxes, even insurance, other services. It's all prices get driven up in the more expensive parts of the country. So there's a geographical component. And finally, one that I think is very much overlooked and can get a bit technical, but is super duper important, is government policy. So obviously the most blatant government policy that makes Frum life super duper expensive is the fact that the yeshiva tuition is not subsidized by the government. It's not even tax deductible. College is tax deductible. Many, many things are deemed of vital social importance and are tax deductible. Yeshiva tuition, even for K-12, which is a legal obligation, is not tax deductible. So that is a government policy. The general cost of taxes is also very much influenced by government viewing certain things as important. So a simple example, let's say family sizes, earned income tax credit for low-income families. The max they recognize as deserving of additional funding is up to 3 children. So if you have somebody with the same, 2 households with the same amount of income, but one has 3 kids, one has 6 kids, the one with 6 kids is not getting more earned income tax credits. Health insurance, the policies of who's eligible for subsidies, who's not, child care, government, social programs, all of these things we will demonstrate later when we delve into the great cost of taxes that many Frum families bear, disproportionately affects the Frum community versus the average American family. So now that we discussed the 5 key factors that drive Frum families' expenses to be far beyond the average American family's expenses, let's start going into some of the key and most substantial costs that Frum families bear that is demonstrably greater than the average family. So the average American family, according to the Consumer Expenditure Survey in 2022, spent $24,000 a year on their housing, whether that was rent, whether that was mortgage interest that included utilities, property tax, etc. $24,000 a year. That's $2,000 a month. Now, think of the geography. That includes people living in the heartland of the country, where costs are far lower. That includes even for non-Frum Jews living in New York, New Jersey, if they have a household of one person or two people or four people, they could very comfortably live in a far smaller space than a family of 5, 10 people. So the norm for a Frum family can easily be not $2,000 a month, but $4,000 a month or $8,000 a month or even greater. Think of the price of real estate. The median price of a home in America now in the second quarter of 2024 was $412,000, right? That sounds like a dream when you're comparing it to Borough Park, $1 million plus, Williamsburg, $1 million plus, Muncie, $1 million plus, Heart of Lakewood, you're approaching $1 million plus, Bergen County, Staten Island, you may get a little less if you're taking a relatively modest home with modest furnishings, depending on the condition, on the size, but definitely far beyond $400,000. And especially, as we're noting, that a Frum family that may have 8 people in the household, 10 people in the household, is far more likely to need more than the average in their area. So that is on multiple factors, whether it's family size and very much geography. Also, the social side of it is as it becomes more and more, quote unquote, normal for a house in a Frum area to be 3,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet, even greater, that raises the norms and the expectations. I remember in Lakewood when a 2,500 square foot home was considered a nice sized home. And today, the builders will not build a home less than 3,200, 3,600, even 4,000 is considered normal. So bigger house obviously costs more. Living in an expensive part of the country obviously costs more. The furnishings also have a great social component. So that is the combination. Family size, geography, social norms have created a scenario where the cost of housing for a Frum family typically will far exceed the $2,000 a month that the average family across America is paying. I want to just note something very important, which I think is overlooked on a positive note, that even in the more expensive geographies and larger homes that many Frum families are living in, very many of them were able to buy it before the COVID bump in prices. And more significantly, the vast majority of people who bought homes before 2022 were able to finance it and locked in long-term financing in the low single digits. So you can have 2 people living in the exact same home. One of them has a mortgage rate of 2 or 3. One of them has a mortgage rate of 6 or 7. So this housing cost, even in the Frum world, varies greatly. But anybody who did not buy a home, the younger couples that are thinking how they're going to be able to afford it are really, really stressed from all sides. They have the geographical issue. They have the larger home size that they're seeking. At the same time, mortgage rates, even though they've fallen a bit as we record this in August of 2024 from the peaks of a couple months ago, but they're still far higher than what many other people have paid, which is part of the way they were able to afford to build such large homes. Okay, that's housing. What about food? Food, according to the U.S. Consumer Expenditure in 2022, the average family spent $9,300 on food. So let's take the 5 factors. The kosher food, I did a quick survey. I just went to ShopRite.com and I went to one of the large supermarkets that has an online presence in large Lakewood supermarkets. And I compared 11 items, real basic items: a gallon of milk, a pound of chicken, a pound of salmon, a pound of ground beef, a yogurt, bottle of ketchup, 40 ounces of canola oil, Hellman's mayonnaise, a box of noodles, cornflakes, and tuna. The ShopRite bill, $43. The kosher supermarket bill, including some of the items which are even on sale, was $60, 40% more. So 40% more right there, that's a couple $1,000s. However, a far greater impact is simply the other factor of family size. Average American household, 3-4 people. Average Frum household is 8 to 10 people. So you have to let's say double the $9,300 that the average American family spends would bring you to $18,600. Add on the 40% premium would bring you to $26,000. So there you have it. It's almost triple the food price, assuming 6 children in the household. Some families have 8 kids. Some families have 10 or 12 kids. In addition, the social side of that, we need to be honest here. Very many average Americans wouldn't know what Wagyu beef is. They would not be buying $8 rolls of sushi on a regular basis. They are totally unfamiliar with many of the higher end foods that we see on a regular basis in even regular supermarkets in the Frum community. That speaks to the social factor of food, that because there are people who could afford it, and let's be frank as well, a lot of the tzedakah events and simchas that are part and parcel of Frum life, they introduce us to very, very high-end eating that many average Americans wouldn't contemplate doing, except for maybe a once in a decade splurge for a 10-year anniversary. So you add on the social factor to the foods. You add on as well Shabbos, Yontif. Obviously, we're not serving macaroni and cheese or hamburgers. We're going to go high end. We should go high end for Shabbos and Yontif. Shabbos and Yontif is not included in our regular budgets, as is well known. However, you still need to have the money to pay for it. So I'm simply focusing on the cost side and saying it would not be surprising at all for a Frum family of even moderate size to be spending 3 to 4 times what the average American family is spending. And we're seeing that from surveys. Many families are spending $500, $700, even $1,000 a week. For sure, once you start including takeout, which has also become a necessity in many homes, both parents are often working. They got to bring in that $250,000 income. So they're bringing in pizza, they're eating out once in a while, and other occasions. So there you have it. It's perfectly normal and logical that a Frum family's food bill will be far, far more than the average American's food bill. Okay, now here's the big one. The big one is education. Now, they do have a segment in the Consumer Expenditure Survey for education, and guess what that massive, massive number is that the average American family pays? That includes college, that includes books, that includes kindergarten, et cetera, et cetera. On average, because the average American pays almost nothing for education, they're relying on public education for the most part. Most college is also heavily, heavily subsidized. The average American family is spending a whopping total of $1,335 per year on education. Now, that is where the red lights are flashing. The average Frum family is easily spending tens of thousands of dollars a year on yeshiva tuition alone. Very many are getting scholarships, but even with scholarships, they are still having to come up with tens of thousands of dollars. It's really, again, it's simple math. The cost per student that public schools are spending ranges to, easily $10,000, $20,000, even $25,000 per kid. You look at the cost of private school. For those Americans that are sending private, they're easily spending $15,000 a kid plus. So the Frum schools that are offering a dual education, that are doing it for $7,000, on the lower end, $10,000, $15,000, as high as $25,000. Education is expensive. Good quality education is expensive, and that's a lengthier conversation that we're going to have. We'll do a full segment on tuition, but anyway, you slice it. Tuition is expensive, and the bulk of the cost now is falling on regular middle income families that are coming up with $25,000, $50,000, even $100,000 a year for tuition. So this is a massive disparity that Yossi Schmidt, the average Frum family, has to come up with versus Joe Smith. And if there's any one, if there's any one thing that really differentiates the Frum family from the average American family, it's yeshiva tuition, and it's really salt on the wounds that it's not even tax deductible, as I mentioned. So the Frum world is really paying tremendous amount. Now we're not even discussing childcare. Again, in order to come up with the huge sums of money to support a Frum family, it's extremely common that both parents end up working, even if they have a full house of children. Childcare is expensive and has become even more expensive. This is something where the government intervention to subsidize childcare for lower income families is actually driving up the prices drastically for middle income and upper income families. Childcare in my vicinity, I would say, has easily doubled in the past couple of years. And some people are getting it for free via government subsidies or virtually free. And then you have middle income families, by Frum standards, they're earning, they're living middle income lives, not taking expensive vacations, not living in luxurious homes, but their income is high because they need that income to pay the yeshiva tuition, to pay for the kosher food, et cetera, et cetera. But therefore, they're not eligible for daycare subsidies. So it's a vicious cycle. You need to earn a lot of money to pay your bills, but then you're not eligible for for even middle income subsidies that are becoming more and more prevalent in America. Camp as well has become a necessity for many dual income families, or even families where one of the parents are home. Even so, many kids need camp today. That has to do with our social structure. It has to do with many of the stresses that we live under, much of it driven by the endless quest for parnasa. Bottom line, camp can cost thousands of dollars per child. And also seminary. Seminary is a hot button topic that we will also have a complete segment on. But for many parents feel it's an absolute must. Many mechanchim and mechanchos say it's an absolute must. There's a whole shidduch angle there, which needs to be explored. Bottom line, even after Pell Grants, whatnot, seminary is going to cost you $5,000-10,000 at a minimum, but many parents are paying far higher, $25,000-30,000 per child, and we have many more children. So you start adding these things up. We got to pay for tuition. We have many more children on average versus the average American. Social pressure is pushing us into camp seminaries that themselves keep feeling the need to up their quality and the level of amenities that they offer, which raises prices. And the education / childcare camp seminary burden is at the top of the list for most Frum families. And that's something that think about it. If the average Frum family could easily be paying $50,000, $100,000 on these items per year, that's more than the entire average American's expenditure, and most of it is not tax deductible. So that really, if you want to pick the one burning item, is tuition. Now, when you get to further segments, to me the tuition vouchers is a true game changer. That's live now. There are states where middle income and low income families can have free tuition. It's live right now, and that's something that I call it one of the few game changers. The reason it's a game changer is because it's one of the primary sources of the tremendous costs that we all are bearing. Okay, moving along, taxes. Taxes, I don't want to get bogged down in complexity, but this really is relatively simple in that the American tax system is very progressive. What that means is that the more you earn, the more you pay in tax. But once you start delving into how extreme that is, America is very different than the more socialist structures of Europe, Canada, England, etc., where the tax burden is shared more on a more level basis across the population. In America, the bottom 56% of the country does not pay any tax. They actually have a net gain once you calculate the credits and other transfers they get via Medicaid and earned income tax credit and food stamps, etc. The only the top 40% of the country is paying tax. Now, it is what it is, and that is the system. However, the Frum world, because we have certain expenses that are obligatory to us, namely tuition, kosher food, having larger families, etc., that is something that the American government, when they're doing their calculations about who, quote unquote, has extra, quote unquote, money to contribute as taxes, they view the average Frum family that's earning $250,000 as someone that should be kicking in a good chunk of tax. A Frum family that's earning $400,000, they say, should be kicking in huge chunks of money into the system. But they don't make a difference for the fact that Frum families, first of all, like we mentioned, geographically, our cost of living is higher. They do take some difference. They do make some adjustments for family size, but as we noted, it's not really on full parity that larger families necessarily are really getting their tax bill lowered because they have a large family. We're definitely not getting our tax bills lowered for tuition, kosher food, etc. So you could have two families. One is Frum, one is not Frum. They're both earning. They're both earning the same amount of money, but a Frum family is choking because they have to give a huge chunk of that $250,000 to tuition. So they're grossing $250,000, but they have to put $50,000 towards tuition. They have to put an extra $20,000, $30,000 into food. So the $40,000 that Uncle Sam is demanding, since they're earning this great $250,000 salaries, is really cutting them to the bone, not cutting into their luxuries. So that is something that the tax system is not recognizing, the fact that what our costs are really, really basic living costs. Now, I understand philosophically, that's something that's a fair debate. They definitely don't want to subsidize religion, and whether or not they should be subsidizing private school is something that I think they should, and I think it's something that our Askanim should be working feverishly to make that case. However, bottom line, the tax system is something that affects the Frum world much more harshly because we are even people who are living middle class lifestyles are expected to kick in a huge amount of tax. So again, that's a bit. I hope you're following on that. So bottom line, the average American family, which is earning the average $94,000, is paying virtually no tax, whereas a Frum family earning $250,000 is paying a whole boatload of taxes. So taxes is a big burden on the Frum family that is not really proportionate if you look at it through the eyes of a progressive lens. Once you take into account that we must pay for our school and we must pay for kosher food, etc. Similarly, healthcare today is very heavily subsidized. The average American family, according to the Consumer Expenditure Survey, is paying $6,000 a year, whether that's premiums, whether that's copays. Many Frum families in a similar vein are not eligible for Medicaid, for sure not, but even a lot of the subsidies that were put in place under Obamacare that can make health insurance free or almost free for middle-income families. What is middle income in the Frum world, because our structural cost of living is far higher, very often we're not eligible for healthcare subsidies, and the bills over there can be gargantuan. $15,000, $25,000 is not unusual. Okay, now there's a very interesting section called cash contributions, which includes charity and alimony. Alimony in the Frum world, I guess is similar or higher, but it's a relatively small phenomenon, relatively. Charity is interesting. A third of Americans don't give charity. Interestingly, the lower income one family is, the higher percentages of them give charity. It's a fascinating stat. But basically, on average, the people who are giving charity are giving about 4% of their income, or about $2,650, about $2,650. Meiser, for a family earning $250, obviously is far higher. Let's even say they're giving it net of tax, so maybe it's a $20,000 amount that they're giving. Now we know Asa B'Shvil Shetis Asher, and the way they're able to earn the 250, Hashem is giving them the ability to earn that money, very likely because of the schus of the ma'aser they're giving. Again, I'm just talking about the check size, why they shouldn't believe they're doing something wrong in that they're earning 250 or more and they still feel stressed. The rest of cash contributions is gifts that people give. So, this really leads to two categories that are also massive: simchas and support for married children. So simchas, a lot of Frum people, may be unaware, but it's not unusual in the non-Frum world for parents to also help their children pay for their weddings. According to what I Googled up, about half of weddings in America are partially subsidized by parents. Parents are typically kicking in about 50% of the cost. And the cost of the wedding, on average, about $35,000 on average. Now, it's interesting. That's an average. The median cost of a wedding in America, according to USA Today, is under $10,000. So, that's obviously far less than, and when they call weddings, they're including the other related expenses as well. So obviously that is far beneath what most Frum people are spending to marry off their children. A lot of that is not extravagance. If you drop deeper into that, I believe a lot of that has to do with simply the size of the guest list. The guest list in the average in the average American wedding is about 100 people, 115 people. In the Frum world, simply by nature of our far larger families and our tighter social network, even 300 is not a lot. I'm one of 14 children, for example. If you just figure aunts, uncles, and first cousins, that 115 number is really, really small. We're also, like we said, we're very, very socially connected, which is a good thing. So a typical Takana wedding in Lakewood today is allowing 300 people. And if you know the prices of Takana weddings in Lakewood, which could be $17,000, $25,000, somewhere in that ballpark, we're actually getting a tremendous value, for our weddings when you look on a per person basis. That being said, people are spending a lot of money on simchas. We said as well, there's brisim, there's kedushim, there's bar mitzvahs, shever brachis, and all the other things that are family sizes, our social structure. Social norms also keeps driving the costs of gifts much higher. That's become a huge expense. Shekel, streimlach, even the quality of shever brachis, the food, the gifts, the welcome baskets, the hostess gifts, all of these things has made simchas a huge, huge expense. Again, it's a combination of the number of children we marry off, the amount of guests that we need to invite, and that has become a huge, huge cost. So it's really a joke when you think of its average American family, even if the average wedding is $34,000 and parents are giving half of that, so you're talking $17,000. And if you have two kids, that's a grand total of $35,000. So that's less than what most parents are spending on one child, and in the Frum world. In the Frum world, we kind of you're doing this for 4 kids, 8 kids, 12 kids. It's a huge expense, and it's one of the reasons why the typical Frum family is not thinking about retirement savings, which again, that's a whole segment by the Shem we're going to do. But it's perfectly logical. You have a $500,000, $1 million liability, I like to call it, that's looming far beyond the retirement years, and that's a huge, huge burden on financial costs on the Frum family. Again, it's our simchas. We're not complaining. This is what we live for. This is what we save for. And helping our children get off on the right foot. The social pressures have to be dealt with. It's not healthy that the costs of external things to the wedding keep going up, and that has to be dealt with. By we have to talk about it, and there has to be communal efforts to address that, and individual families, Bali Simcha, have to address that. But again, we're focused on why $250,000 does not get the Frum family very far, and simchas is a big part of that. In addition, support in certain circles is basically obligatory. It does tie very much into the shidduch issues that Klal Yisrael has been discussing. There are absolute expectations in certain circles for significant amounts of money, even after the couple gets married. So that is a tremendous financial burden. Again, communal conversation should be happening. How much support? Who needs support? How long should support be? It's a beautiful thing that young couples are able to go to kollel. Obviously that varies by community, but it's a wonderful phenomenon that keeps spreading. That's my personal bias. I learned in kollel. My children, Baruch Hashem, are learning kollel. But bottom line, it is a cost, and that is why the Frum family's expenditures far exceed the average American's expenditures. Clothing. The average American family is spending $2,000 a year on clothing. As noted, we have on average far more people in the family. So if 4 people are spending $2,000, then double that or triple that. At the same time, we have, because of Shabbos, Yontif, Simchas, we need dressier clothing that's expensive to maintain and think of, I'm thinking 2,000. It doesn't cover even the cost of one gown if you're buying it, or a family that's paying rentals. $2,000 doesn't cover. The social factor is a real thing, and again, it has to be addressed. I'm not saying that these numbers are locked in. It's important you note that. I'm not saying these numbers are locked in. I'm not saying we should be spending this amount of money. But however, I'm primarily addressing the question that people are having, that why does $250,000 seem like a drop in the bucket when I'm earning so much money by American standards? The answer is the Frum family is not living like the average American family. Okay, we're almost getting to the bottom of the list here. Transportation. The average American household is spending about $12,000 a year. Some people in America are using public transportation. Some are using, some have 2 cars, some have 1 car, leasing, whatever. On average, they're spending $12,000. That includes insurance, that includes fuel, etc. So the Frum world, some of us live in New York. We technically use public transportation. We do have bigger families, so we need bigger vehicles, which tend to be more expensive. Households are also more complex. I think it's far more of a must for a large household to end up needing 2 vehicles, just there's just so much going on. So it's not unusual for our cost to be higher. I'll throw in 2 more costs, and then we'll head towards the summaries. Therapy has become a huge line item in many Frum families' budgets. I do not know how that relates to the average American family. It's not showing up as a line item in the Consumer Expenditure Survey, and definitely not in huge numbers. So maybe it's lumped together in that health number of what was it? I think $5,000. What was it? $6,000, which does not go very far. At the rates that therapists that are in demand in the Frum community charge. Not unusual that people are paying $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a year in therapy. Also, cleaning help has become a very, very common line item, a large line item Frum families. Again, we're talking about very often just dual incomes. Even if the mother is not working, very often she's taking care of 5, 10 children, or even less, just a number of young babies. That is something that many couples feel is an absolute must to keep their sanity, shalom bayis, to enable them to earn the large sums of money that are required for Frum families to exist. So that's another line item that one could argue is unique to the Frum world. And that is, again, why Frum cost of living is gargantuan when we compare it to the average Joe Smith across America. So there we go. It's basic math. Very possibly you're doing everything right, or almost everything right. Yeah, I find most people can tweak this, they can tweak that, and you should tweak it. You got to raise your income 10%. You got to cut your expenses 10%. But bottom line, the numbers are very, very large, and that really is the driver of the Parnassa challenge. The driver of the Parnassa challenge is not, for the most part, that Frum families are not earning a lot of money and can't earn a lot of money. That is just a fallacy and a canard. The data shows and logic shows that the average Frum family is earning far more than the average American family. However, our cost of living is easily 3, 4, 5 times greater, very often for expenses that are really, for the most part, out of the average from family's hands. So we have to do our shtadlus, try to make it better. But overall, it's perfectly normal that things are very hard. Again, and the way I like to think about it is that we're in the big leagues. We're aiming higher. When we choose to have large families, we choose to live in Frum areas, so we could gain the most from our shuls, our yeshivas, our families, our social networks. And we're makbid on good sherim, and we celebrate Yontif and Shabbos royally. Simchas are huge to us. That's good. It's great. It's a good design Yid. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's this is it. Now again, Be'ez Hashem, this podcast is primarily about how we can improve things. And Be'ez Hashem, we're going to have future segments and episodes about how individual families can, Be'ez Hashem, try to earn more money, save more money, invest better, be more budget conscious, etc. And also we're going to have conversations about how the klal as a community, what can we do to expand tuition vouchers? What can we do to stop the social spiral of spending needs, quote unquote? So what can we do to try to get subsidies for camps, for therapy, et cetera, et cetera? What can we do to try to bring down the cost of housing? These are all important things, and I'm optimistic that with financial awareness, financial education, and communal achdus, these are all things that we can work on. However, at this stage, I just want to stress that you're very likely you're not doing anything major wrong. You're working really hard. You're Baruch Hashem overall, hopefully paying your bills, some more, some less, and that's it. So you got to keep plugging away. Baruch Hashem, you got to keep listening to this podcast. You got to read my geldguide.com website, subscribe to my newsletter. You're not doing anything wrong. You're doing everything right. And Be'ez Hashem, keep doing what you're doing, but let's try to do it a little better. Be'ez Hashem, upcoming podcasts, we'd like to discuss. Bottom line, how do people make it? That's typically the question that people ask after, what am I doing wrong? And then, why is Frum Life so expensive? They say, bottom line, if Frum Life, if a bare minimum can be $250K, and you still don't have money for simchas and retirement, so how are people doing it? Is everyone earning $500,000? That is a great question. And Be'ez Hashem, in our upcoming episodes, we will address that. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Parnasa Podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with your family and friends. Visit geldguide.com to send me your questions, comments, or feedback. Be'ez Hashem, I respond to each email personally. Geldguide.com is also where you can read hundreds of exclusive Parnasa articles and subscribe to my free weekly newsletter with new Parnasa insights and updates. Please remember that building wealth is not about how much you earn, but how much you save and invest. And finally, in the beautiful words of Micha, Perek Vav, Higel lecha adam ma toiv u'ma shem darash mincha ki em aseis mishpat v'yahavas chesed v'atznei aleches t'malikecha.